Hello and welcome to another Blender game engine tutorial. In this one we'll be taking this low poly tree that you see here with the land underneath it, and we'll be modeling it from scratch. Then we'll add a little bit of code and put it into the Blender game engine so you can take it in there and you can orbit it around like this using different keyboard controls. And then we'll go ahead and we'll also make the light movable so that you can get a little bit of dynamic lighting. And it's just a fun little project for beginners and intermediates. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so here we are. I will be screencasting my keyboard keys that I'm pressing like that, so they'll be down there in the bottom left hand corner if that helps you out. I'll also be saying what they are as well as usual. Okay, so the first thing we're going to get out of the way, because I usually forget this, is we need to activate the game engine in Blender. So I'm going to come right up here to where it says Blender Render, choose Blender Game. I'm going to come over here on the right hand side. I'm on the render panel, which is a little camera. I'm going to come down here, and right down here you're going to see an area that says shading. It's probably going to be set to multi-texture. You're going to want to make sure it's set to GLSL. And that basically turns on all of the good visual capabilities of the Blender game engine. Alright, so let's get to modeling the low poly tree. So there's a lot of tutorials and resources out there for doing low poly in both 2D, vector graphics like Adobe Illustrator, and also in 3D. And you can look it up, there's a lot out there. It's a really cool style, it's great for beginners, and it's a really nice look where you can be successful. So I'm all about it. Alright, we're going to take the default cube and I'm going to press tab and get into edit mode. Now if you don't see these buttons popping up here, it means you don't have the Pi menu add-on installed. It's fine if you don't have it, but it is really nice to set that up. I'm going to click on edit mode, and the entire cube is selected when we get into edit mode. And now I'm going to press Option M, and when you press Option M, I'm going to choose at center. And that way all of the vertices merge together, they fuse together in the center, and it looks like it's gone, but it's really right here in the center there. Okay, so now I'm going to press numpad 1 on my keyboard, and that gets me into front view. And I just find that that's a little easier for drawing the shape of the tree. So with that vertex selected, I'm going to now press E and I'm going to extrude. And when I extrude, I'm pulling out another vertex right here and an edge in between the two. And so now I can just keep pressing E and I'm basically drawing the trunk of the tree. And I'm just going to pan and zoom with my mouse. To pan, it's Shift middle mouse button. Unfortunately, that doesn't show up on my screencast keys. Alright, so that's the trunk for now, and now I'm going to start working on the first branch. And I'm just going to do, you can see I'm just right mouse clicking to select the vertex, and then E again to get sort of a triple branch over here. Then I'll come back here to the main bow here, I guess it's called, and then I'll go ahead and I'll do another one. Something like that. And you can just play around with it. And I'm just going to do a 3-branch one like that. Okay. Okay. A little trick, if you want to add in a vertex, let's say I decide I want to add in another vertex in between these two here, what you can do is you can shift right mouse click, and so that allows you to select both vertices. And then if you press W, you can choose this first command here called Subdivide, and that will then subdivide the two there, and now you have another one. And now I can press G and I can grab it and I can put a little bend in it, making it a little bit more natural. So I'm just pressing G after I select and moving it around. Okay, so now I'm going to orbit my view using my mouse wheel, and now I can actually see in perspective view what this tree looks like. And of course, since it was done in front view, it's completely flat. So now what I'm doing is I'm just selecting some of the vertices and grabbing them and moving them around so it looks a little bit more natural. I'm going to use box select, so it's B. Left mouse click and drag a selection around the verts that I want to click on, and that allows me to select multiples real quickly. And then I can just come on in and move them individually and just tweak it and get it just right. So just orbit your shot around, see what you've got. A to deselect all, B to box select. You can use the arrows that I'm using here to just grab one real quickly. Go. You could rotate it a little bit if you want to play around with that, like that, and just kind of tweak it a little bit. Just give it some natural move. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll put a little move in the trunk here, and there you go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and call that pretty good. I'm going to just box select the whole top here and maybe scale that in a little bit just to make it a little more proportionate. Okay, so I think it's time to save, so I'm going to go up to File, Save. I'm going to click on my desktop, and I'll just call this Low Poly Tree Demo. Hopefully I spelled that correctly. Okay, good. Okay, so now comes the fun part. Now we actually make it have geometry and make it work, make it 3D. So what you're going to do is you're going to come over here to the right and you're going to click on the wrench icon. This is the modifier panel. And for my students watching this video, this is what we did in the last class. So you're going to click on Add Modifier, and you're going to come here to the second column called Generate, and you're going to scroll down and you're going to choose Skin. And that immediately goes ahead and puts in some geometry going all the way around. You don't really need to do anything over here on the right hand side, but now we want to scale some of these vertices. So the best way to do that is we need to actually click and select them. And you can click here like this, and this is actually working out pretty well, but I find it sometimes a little easier to press the letter Z and get into wireframe mode. I realize it might be a little tough to see in this screencast tutorial, but give it a shot. So now what you can do is I'm going to select this bottom. I'm going to select these bottom two verts, and I'm going to press Control A. And when I do that, I can now move my mouse, and you can increase or decrease. You can scale the size of those verts. So again, Control A, increase the size. If you increase or decrease the size too much, and I'll show you what that looks like in solid mode so you can really see it. So here's increasing, decreasing, and you can see if you go too small or too big, you're going to get some tearing and distortion, and it just doesn't look good. I'm going to go ahead and box select all of the verts at the top here. And I know it's tough to see here, so that's why wireframe is really good. And then I can press Control A and I can scale all of them down at once, so that's a big time saver. So just go ahead and kind of go around. Again, for here, the most important thing now is you're looking at proportion. You want to take it smaller and smaller as we go out to the ends there. Okay, and just every once in a while, press Z, get back into solid mode, and take a look at it. Again, if it looks a little too small, just scale it up. And I think solid mode works pretty well. Okay, so that looks pretty good, I think. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and click on this little triangle and collapse the modifier. And I'm going to go add another modifier, and this is called a subdivision surface. And what this does is it basically divides or subdivides all of the faces so that I have more geometry, and it smooths out at the same time. And technically this makes it no longer low poly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and you're going to see it says View 1. And you can either leave that at 1 or you can bump it up to 2. 2, of course, is going to give you more geometry, and it looks even nicer. Now don't worry, we are going to do a step that's going to make it look low poly and actually be low poly. Okay, so this is the point where you have to make a decision, and whenever I have to make a decision, I usually file save. But what you have to decide now is, are you truly happy with the shape of your tree? So here's where you can go ahead and select a vertex. You can grab it, you can move it, you can really, set it up all you want. You can even go into wireframe mode, and you can still select two verts. You can press W. You can do subdivide and add in some new geometry and just add in another little bend. So this is the last point where you can really shape and sculpt your tree. Okay, so let's assume that I am happy with everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open both of my modifiers, and I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. It's going to give me an error message telling me that you can't do this in edit mode. So I'm going to press tab, go back to object mode, and I'm going to apply the skin modifier first, then apply the subsurf modifier. And now my geometry is set. I really can't edit it now. If you do need to edit it, you would have to, of course, undo a couple times and go back. Okay, now to make it low poly, I'm going to go back to the Add Modifier button, and I'm going to choose the Decimate modifier. And right here you'll see a slider that says Ratio, and right now it says 1. And if I left click and drag, if you watch closely, it'll start to decimate and destroy. We should start seeing it now. There we go. So if you can see it, it's basically destroying and lowering the count of faces. And that's good because it'll make our game engine run smoother, faster, less lag, and it'll also give us the low poly look. If we go all the way to 0, that's not good. So you decide what you want it to look like, and I think I'm going to kind of decide right about there. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and press apply, and there we go. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make the leaves now. So I'm going to left mouse click, place my 3D cursor up there, and I'm going to do Shift A, and I'm going to add in an icosphere. Icospheres are great because you get a sphere, but it's made up out of triangles, so it already has that low poly look. Now to manipulate this a little bit, it could be a little bit more advanced if you're feeling comfortable in Blender, and you could switch to sculpt mode, and you could kind of sculpt and grab and move this sphere around, but I want to make this tutorial a tiny bit easier. So we're just going to use things like scale and rotate, things like that. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom of my 3D window, and you'll see that I already have the grab manipulators on. So that shows me these arrow keys down here. But if I hold down the Shift key and I click on the rotate manipulators, and if I hold down the Shift key and click on the scale manipulators, I get all three at the same time. It does look like a lot up here at the same time, but if you're careful, it's kind of nice because you can move a little faster if you're not used to keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so I'm going to scale this just a little bit, and I'm really just going to kind of do some random things here just to scale it, rotate it, and just get it looking a little different. If you want to, you can go to the Add Modifiers, and you can add the Decimate modifier. Again, drag the ratio down. You'll see with just a little dragging there, it will go ahead and modify it. And you can just go ahead and hit apply. Once you've got one and you're pretty happy with it, you can press Shift D, and you can then duplicate and drag off another one. And then you just want to change this one up. So I'm going to scale it a little bit so it's a little smaller. Grab it, move it, rotate it. Just add in some variety. Again, it's already decimated, so that's good. And for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and just make this a sort of a triple cluster. You can add in a little bit more, but just remember that the more you add in, the more geometry you're going to get. Okay, so something like that. Okay, so now for time efficiency, I'm going to shift right mouse click, and I'm going to select all three. And then I'm going to press Shift D, and I'm going to duplicate, Shift D again, and duplicate. Go ahead and grab them, place them where you want them to go. And then you can go in and you can customize each little cluster so they are not exact duplicates of each other. I'm going to pause the recording, and I'll come back when I'm done. Okay, so we're back. So here's my cluster here, and again, you can spend as much time as you want on it, making it your own. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in some ground here, and then we'll do color materials. So left mouse click, I'm going to do Shift A, and I'm just going to bring in another icosphere. Scale this one up. Again, because I have those controllers there, I can go ahead and manipulate this. Again, you're doing the exact same thing here. You can maybe decimate this a little bit just to reduce the count. Apply it. And this is going to be my little bit of a ground chunk here. So I'm just kind of flattening it out and getting something there. There we go. Alright, and again, Shift D, duplicate, and add in some differences here, rotate it, all that kind of good stuff, just add in some differences. This is where you put on Bob Ross in the background, and you can go ahead and just make your little happy friends and all that kind of good stuff, and just kind of get into a little zen spot if you want. You can go ahead and, I didn't do this in the video, but or in the original. If you want to, you could go ahead and make this a rock. I'll go ahead and scale this on the Z-axis. We'll make this a rock, maybe. Yeah. Now I feel like Bob. Okay, and you can just lodge those in the ground there, wherever you want to go. All right, so we'll have one kind of large boulder there, and maybe we'll do a smaller one here, as they tend to hang out together. All right, so you could literally spend hours doing this. All right, so I'm going to call that ready. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do materials, and materials are all kind of done the same way. So once I get a couple of materials done, and I think you get the idea, I'll pause the recording again, and we'll go ahead and move on. So I'm going to start with the tree here. I'm going to come over here to the right and click on the material panel. It looks like a little beach ball. And this one, since it was the cube, it already has a material called material. I'm going to go ahead and double click, and I'm just going to call this tree. And then I'm going to come down here to where it says diffuse and click on this little rectangle here, and I'm going to go ahead and choose a shade of brown, lower my value so I get that kind of that nice brown there. A note on my colors that I'm picking very light colors, very muted, desaturated colors, so I'm sticking to sort of the middle of the color wheel. Makes that nice look there. Okay. Next, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the ground here. So I'm going to select my first chunk of ground, and you'll notice that I have no material, so I'm going to click on New, and it adds in a random material called Material. I'm going to double click, and I'm just going to call this Grass 1. And you'll see the reason why I'm naming, being specific and taking time to name them. Select the next one. Give this one a different name. And this one's going to be a little darker. Okay, so now I want this other grass one over here to have the exact same material as this darker one over here. So you don't need to click on New and make a new one. What you want to do is click on this little button here that's called Browse Materials, and this shows you all of your materials. This is why I'm naming all of them, because it's so much easier to see. If you don't name them, they'll be called material, material.001, .002, and you can work that way. You just have to now look at the little previews here, and it becomes a little bit harder. That part does slow you down. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to name my rocks. I'll maybe do 2 shades of rock. And then up here for the leaves, I'll maybe do kind of like fall colors because I'm from New England. And maybe I'll do like a red, an orange, and a yellow or something like that. Alright, I'm going to pause the video and I'll come back when I'm all done with my materials. Okay, so I'm back, and you can see how real easy it is. I decided to make 4 colors here for my tree, so I had a little variety. So I just select an object, come over here to the material browser, and I can just basically pick and choose. And it does become much faster, and because I name them, it helps out. The cool thing about this is that if you decide, let's say you want to change your yellow, you basically can come over here and you can tweak it. So if I want to go ahead do that, you can see if I want to change them to pink. All of them do change. Now if you decide you want, of course, 2 varieties of orange or 2 varieties of red, you do need to make a new material. But there we go there. And again, maybe the brown, and you can change that so it could be sort of darker, more intense. You can do that all you want. So the material browser is pretty nice and forgiving and flexible as an artist. Okay, so I think that's pretty much set. I'm going to go ahead and save, and there we go. All right, so let's do the blue sky, and then we'll get into the interactive sort of gaming portion of this tutorial. So you're going to come over here to the right and click on the world panel, and real simply you're going to see where it says world, and it says horizon color, and it's this dark, this middle gray here. And I'm just going to go ahead and make it go a little brighter. And then I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit into the blue, something desaturated, and you can see that it's changed there. Now to actually see it showing up here in the game engine, you have to put your mouse pointer here in the game engine and you have to press the letter P. Now this is what it's going to look like, all white. And the reason why is because you have to tell Blender how you want to view this display window here. So the way you do that is you press Z, and if you have the pie menu here showing up, you can choose either material or you can choose texture. So if I choose texture, you'll see it'll work. Now if you don't have the pie menu installed, you can just come down here to the bottom of your 3D window. There's this little tiny pop-up menu called Viewport Shading, and you can just choose texture there. So it looks pretty dark and ominous, and that's because of the type of light and the location of it. So here's my light. I just selected it, and you can see if I grab it and move it and bring it up, you can see it's now changing in real time, which is really awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with the light selected, I'm going to come over here to the right, click on the light panel. There's 5 kinds of lights, so you can practice changing them. You can of course change the color of the light right here by clicking on the little color picker. You can change the energy, which is the intensity. So if I bump this up to 4, you'll see we're getting certainly more light now. And you can do those kinds of things. So that's pretty cool. So for coding, I could have this light just go up and down, and that's kind of cool. What I did in the very beginning of the video was I made it a sun lamp. And bring the energy back down to 1. And I actually animated the rotation of the sun lamp, so it was actually doing this. So it was a little bit more of like time of day. So I think that's what I'm going to do for this. So okay, so the sun lamp, its rotation really matters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get the sun lamp where I want it to be. I'm just going to kind of move it off to the side here. There we go. We'll do something like that. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of get its rotation, something like that. Okay, so there we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the coding to make the object move around. So the way we do that is I'm going to come down here to the bottom of the screen, I'm going to left mouse click and drag up this bottom divider line. And that makes this bottom window, which is the timeline, a little taller. I'm going to come to the bottom left hand corner and click on this little button in the very bottom corner, and I'm going to change it from a timeline editor to a logic editor. Now when you do this, you're going to see all this stuff here. There's a little panel over here on the right called Properties. If you press the letter N, that will make it go away. Let me just change my screencast there. Okay, so N will make it appear and go away. And then down here in the main window, you can scroll your mouse wheel until you basically see all three of these little columns here. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to, I'm going to join all of these objects here in the landmass so that they become one object. And that's just going to make the coding so much easier because we're going to add the coding to one object. Now what you could do, if you know about parenting, is you could parent all of these objects to one object, like the land, or to the tree, or to an empty, if you know about those. And then you could put the coding on that one object. I'm just going to join these all together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use box select. And so I'm going to press B, box select, and I'm going to box select around all of the tree. I'm then going to do box select again, and I'm going to box select around the ground. Notice that I'm not selecting the camera, and notice that I'm not selecting the light. That's really important. You can also shift right mouse click and do that and select them all. Okay, so now I'm going to press G just to make sure I have them all. Press escape so I don't actually move them. Okay, so now that I've got them all selected, I'm going to press Control J, and that should join them. I'm not sure why it's not working. That's very strange to me. Okay, so I'm not sure why, but it was very strange. It wasn't working. And so what I did was I basically selected all of the objects with box select, and then I deselected one object by shift right mouse clicking. You can see that this landmass is no longer selected. And then I just shift right mouse clicked and added it to the selection again. So I box selected everything and then I manually deselected and then reselected. So I don't know if that's something that I did wrong, but now when I press Control J, you can see that they all join to one object. They're all highlighted, the highlights going around all of them, and then there we go. Okay, so now just to test that, you can right mouse click and the whole object becomes selected. Alright, so you'll notice that when you do that, the origin is now around the last selected object. That one was called the active object. And if I scale, you can see it's scaling from that one point. If I rotate, it's rotating from that one point there. So I want the origin to be back at the center of this object here. So the way you can do that is come over here to this toolbar on the left hand side, and you're looking for this little pop-up menu called Set Origin, and you want to choose Origin to Geometry, and that's just basically going to put it right smack dab in the middle there, and that'll work for us right now. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and save, and let's go ahead and do the coding. So with the coding set here, you're going to come down here and you're going to choose Add Sensor, and we're going to be just using keyboard sensors today. So we're going to say Add Keyboard Sensor, and we're going to click right here where it says Key, press a key, and I'm going to do the left key. Okay, so that's my left arrow. I'm going to now collapse this to save a little bit of space, and you can name them. So I'll just call this left. Okay, you don't have to name them, but it is a good idea. Then I'm going to come over here to where it says Add Actuator, and I'm going to add in a motion actuator. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it, you've got location and you've got rotation. And this tutorial really isn't a tutorial on the game engine. I have more on my channel. This is just the basics. But I want it to rotate. So I have to choose what direction do I want it to rotate on, and I want it to rotate on the Z axis. And I want it to go to the left, so that's going to be a negative rotation. So I'm going to click inside here, and I'm going to do -1 and press return. I just think 1 is a decent speed of rotating. Alright, so now I need to hook the sensor up to the actuator, so I'm just going to left mouse click and drag it from the dot all the way over here, and by doing it and skipping the controller, it automatically adds in a controller automatically. Okay, so now I'm going to test this out. If I bring my mouse pointer up here into the window, and if I press P, I'm in the game engine, and if I press my left, you'll see it does that. Sorry about my screencast kind of going over there, but now you can see that it is in fact rotating. Alright, I'll press escape to get out of the game engine, and there we are. Okay, so that is working. Now that I've got it working, I'm basically going to repeat myself. So I'm going to add another keyboard sensor. Click on key. This time it's going to be the right arrow. Again, it's a good idea to just name them. Do the exact same thing. Motion. This time it's going to be a positive number on the z-axis, so it's +1. There we go. Hook it up, and there we go. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, there we go, and test it, and you can see it works. Sorry about the screencast keys there. Okay, so now for the light, I'm going to right mouse click and select the light, and we're going to do the exact same thing, except we're going to be controlling rotation on the light to do sort of the time of day effect. So again, I'm going to say add sensor, and I'm going to do keyboard, and this time I'm going to do the up arrow and then the down arrow. So just name them. Again, when you collapse them, it's kind of nice because it, you can see what it is, and then you can save more space. All right, so now I've got my up and my down arrow. Again, I'm going to add in 2 motion actuators, and this time I'm going to do the rotation here, and you have to figure out what axis it is. So I happen to know from trying this that I want to rotate it on the x-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put in a very small number. I'm going to say to go up, I'm going to do 1 degree on the x-axis and then wire them up. If you make a mistake, if you're on the wrong axis, no big deal. Just put in a 0 on that one and then put in your number on the other one. It's pretty trial and error friendly. Okay, wire the second one up, and this one's just going to be a -1, so it goes downward. Okay, so I'll save. I'm going to disable my screencast keys so you don't have to watch that. Okay, so we're back. Put your mouse cursor here in the 3D window, press P for play. Here's left and right. Here's up and down, and you can see the sun is changing its rotation. It's actually rotating all the way around in a full circle there. It doesn't seem to be, I'm not getting a whole lot of rotation when I press the down arrow. I'm not sure what's going on there, so I might have to play around with that and see what I've done incorrectly. Okay, so there we go. It was just a simple keyboard shortcut that I did not do, so you can see the light is going there and we're all fixed. So it pays to go back and check, and now you can see that there. Now I realize that in a game you're not going to really press keys on the keyboard to change light time of day. You'd want that to be on a timer or something. After 10 minutes it changes time of day. That's a lot more natural. But I hope you had fun in this tutorial. I tried to keep it as short as possible, but also be thorough and explain everything so it'd be friendly for beginners. Okay, I hope you learned something, and have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.